Well, I'm looking at Gemma here. Is the waiting room all clear? Because then I suggest we get started.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, welcome everyone, and great to see that you showed up in such great numbers here for this virtual exchange between Southampton and Rotterdam today. It's lovely weather in the Netherlands, so we would have loved to welcome you in person and take some great walks through the lovely city. I'm personally tuning in from Amsterdam today, but next time I hope to see you in Rotterdam, which is just a 40-minute train ride away. My name is Charlot Schans. I work for STIPO. So on behalf of STIPO and Go Southampton, a very warm welcome to this exchange and our partners that will be speaking shortly. First, I'm going to give the floor to Giles Semper from Go Southampton to tell us a little bit more about what brings us to Rotterdam from Southampton today. Before we do that, a final reminder for the technicalities. Please do keep your cameras on if you like, and keep your microphones on mute if you're not talking. There will be some room for interaction later on, so then we'll ask you to unmute if you're asking a question or anything like that. But do keep your microphones on mute if you're not speaking. And then I'm going to give the floor to Giles.
Thank you, Charlotte. It's wonderful to see everybody on the screen. So encouraging in these difficult times. That's also been the experience of our City of Culture effort, seeing all your wonderful faces on the screen. So I'm feeling that again today, although I'm at home, as I'm sure a lot of you also will be. Well, I was lucky enough to go to Rotterdam for the first time in the mid-2000s. Even then, at that point, many important projects in Rotterdam were not even out of the ground at the time, like the incredible Day Rotterdam complex and the particularly awesome Central Station. But I could already feel the sense of excitement, the feeling of change happening, which is, I think, something that we're experiencing in Southampton at the moment. And I remember sitting down with one of my hosts at the time for what the Dutch euphemistically call a small beer, and thinking, we're actually sitting in the middle of a street here, and I feel good about it. Well, when I started working in Southampton, I was struck by the similarities between our two cities. We are both famous port cities, of course. We were both badly bombed, Rotterdam on the 14th of May, 1940, and Southampton on the 29th and 30th of November, also in 1940. Then we were both reconstructed using a lot of concrete in a modernist, brutalist style. And the truth is that both cities can also claim to be, quote, still under reconstruction. In fact, this is probably at the heart of Rotterdam's vision and its wonderful, memorable city brand, Make It Happen. Our two Go Southampton board visits to Rotterdam in 2018 and 2019 have been very happy affairs. And I would like to thank our friends at STIPO for their part in organising them. We clambered through the roof spaces of Central Station with Marika Rice, the station manager. We consumed vegan burgers, in some cases reluctantly, in a vintage railway carriage in the middle of the up-and-coming Soho area. And I can genuinely say that my professional life and the life of our organisation were changed by meeting Robin and Olof in particular. So there's no pressure there, gents, but that's the effect that you had on us. I can mention in our discussion later how perhaps Rotterdam learning has translated into our work. But to conclude, Charlotte asked me to identify some themes, and I am actually just going to propose, or I'm going to propose just three in the form of questions. The first question, how do you make streets that people can really enjoy? The second question is, how do you create space for culture in a city, indoor and outdoor? And my third question, and this is always the one that intrigues me, as I was just telling my colleagues a few minutes ago, why does Rotterdam succeed when many other cities don't or struggle to succeed? Thank you, and back to you, Charlotte.
So much, Giles, and thank you again for being with us. So I guess many of these questions will be addressed in the program that we have prepared for you. Although I do think that especially the last question might be a point of discussion, because like we said right before everybody joined us in this room, the grass might seem greener. So let's see what we can also learn from Southampton at the very end of this program. Let me first show you quickly what we have in store for you. Here we go again. So, well, after this little extended welcome, I will give the floor to my colleague Hans Karsenberg, who's a partner and founder at STIPO. He will sketch a bit of the context of the city of Rotterdam. Then Emiel Arends, who's a senior planner at the city of Rotterdam, will tell us about the amazing 7 city projects that the city of Rotterdam has recently launched and will work on for the coming years. Then Olof van der Wal, director at SKAR Ateliers, will tell us the intriguing story of the Wasserij, a hub for the fashion industry that has opened recently in the city of Rotterdam. And Robin van Weiler is last, but certainly not least, up to tell us more about the Maint and the role of active street curation in getting great or becoming great streets for people. Then at the very end, we'll have some time to exchange and some room for discussion with all of you. So we hope that you will have your questions prepared by then. But before we get started, we first wanted to test a little bit of your knowledge and know-how about the city of Rotterdam from Southampton. So I'm going to ask my colleague Pim to launch the first quiz questions. And then I'll take you through all of them, because first of all, we're very interested to learn who of you have ever been in Rotterdam. We're still waiting, I think, for the questions to launch, yeah, here we go. So who has been to Rotterdam? We're very interested to learn. And then if all goes well, you can just click on the poll results on the poll to give us your answers. No need to log in or do anything difficult. Then the other questions are more like quiz questions. So we're wondering if you know the right answers to them. So second question is, which city has the richest diversity of residents? Is that Rotterdam or Southampton? Then third question might be a tricky one, because it's a question of what you think a signature dish is like. But Rotterdam and Southampton both have signature dishes, and I would like to know what they have in common. Then fourth question, well, a big thing that Rotterdam and Southampton have in common is, of course, they're both port cities. So we were wondering if you know which city has the longest port. And if it comes down to the passengers of the cruise ships, which city has the most passengers on a yearly basis? Of course, in non-corona times. And final question, we all know that, or maybe not all know, but most people do know that the Titanic left from Southampton. And we were wondering if you know what the length of the Titanic was. So I'll give you some time to answer these questions, and we'll look at the results of a few minutes. I think the poll is closed, but I'm not sure if anybody answered any of these questions, Pim. Or am I seeing it incorrectly? Do you see the answers, Giles? Or is it just me who? No, right?
No, not yet, Charlotte.
I can't see. Oh, there we go. I've restarted.
Okay, can we launch them again then? See if people can answer them. So please do click. Oh, now it's closed again. I think it closes too quickly for people to answer. So please relaunch the poll. And if there's any technical difficulties, we'll get back to it later. Maybe we can solve them behind the scenes first. Ah, here we go. First votes are coming in. So please share your answers with us. So I'll give you 1 more minute for some final questions, but I think most of you already participated. So I think we can close the poll in 10 seconds. Share the results. Okay, close the poll. Here we go. Can you see the results?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's nice. It's almost a 50-50 between people who have ever been in Rotterdam and who have not, with a slight majority in people who have been. So that's a great start. But of course, we hope to welcome you in Rotterdam, all of you, at some point in the coming time. And then, which city has the richest diversity of residents? This is interesting. Most people thought Southampton. Fun fact, the city of Rotterdam has 174 nationalities in their city, whereas the 2011 poll of Southampton shows 55 nationalities in the city. So unless much has changed in the last 10 years, both censuses showed that Rotterdam is by far the richest in diversity of residents. Then the signature dishes. I'm wondering if anybody knows what we were talking about. At least only 10% of you had it right. We were thinking about Southampton's famous fish fingers and Rotterdam's kapsalon, which is an odd combination of fries and shawarma and lots of spicy sauces and cheese. A bit of cliches maybe, but the common denominator between the two is that they're both fried and not fish-based nor inspired by other cultures, unless I'm mistaking that the fish fingers come from elsewhere. The longest port, yeah, most of you had it correct, because Rotterdam is by far the longest port with 40 kilometers, whereas Southampton has 16 kilometers. And indeed, Southampton by far has the most cruise ship passengers a year, about 1.7 million of them, where Rotterdam has 810,000 last time cruise ships were in the harbor. And then the length of the Titanic, also with a slight majority, you got it correct. 269 meters was the length of the Titanic. So great. I think the majority of you made a pass, although the surprising results of the diversity in residents is something to work on if you come to Rotterdam to experience that with your own eyes. Okay, so we can stop sharing the poll now. I hope you liked warming up a little bit, and well, we might do some test rounds again if you ever come to Rotterdam. But for now, we'll go to the first round of presentations. I'm going to give the word to Hans Karsenberg, my colleague, as I said, at STIPO, to extend the welcome to the city of Rotterdam. Hans, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you very much, and big welcome to everybody to this virtual tour of Rotterdam. I decided not to tell the more formal part of what's happening in Rotterdam, but more the informal part of Rotterdam. Because one of the things we really like about the city of Rotterdam is the sense of informality it has and the sense of experimentation it has. And I think that's a characteristic that both cities have in common as well. But first, I would like to start my story here. I tried to reconstruct, but it must have been around 2003 when my dear friend Graham from Winchester, big Saints fan, took me to St. Mary's Stadium. It was Southampton versus Leeds, and I was really keen to see Beattie play, the then SKAR. Of course, we entered the stadium and heard that he wasn't playing that day. So everybody felt very miserable and thought they would never win against Leeds. And Southampton scored 1-0, Southampton scored 2-0. And the Leeds, the Southampton fans started singing to the Leeds fans, and we still have Beattie on the bench, which for me was a really memorable moment. We were with a group of friends, and there was one German guy in the group. And after the football match, we went into the inner city, and then this German guy, he was a really young guy, so please forgive him. He was called Sasha. He was looking around and was saying, why are there so many modern buildings here? And my dear friend Graham, of course, went, yes, Sasha, do you really want to talk about that? Which, of course, is something that Southampton and Rotterdam have in common. Like Giles was saying, Rotterdam was bombed in the war. It had a very historic inner city, which was completely taken away. Some buildings still left standing, but you can see the kind of the desert of the devastation that happened here. The urban planners of the city of Rotterdam then started reconstructing the city center, but they were modernists. They wanted to get rid of the historic, chaotic feeling that the inner city used to have before the war, and really build up a more rational new inner city. And this was their plan, which today still is something I think the city is still struggling with, because it meant that a separation of functions, whereas you would want your inner city to have a great mix of functions. So around 15 years ago, with Emil Arends, who will be speaking today as well, we started working on a program for the inner city revitalization. And by then the city had come to realize that it's not going to be enough if we just only repave the surface of the public space. We need to create a whole new experience in the inner city. And that experience, if you take that as a starting point of a pedestrian in public space, you and me walking down the street, looking around us, then you don't only see the public space, but you also see the buildings and mostly the ground floors of buildings, what's happening on the ground floors. So that's what we started to call the city at eye level, Rotterdam at eye level. Because we realized if we want to change the city center, we should have strategies for the ground floor uses as well. So we should work together with the building owners, with the landlords, with the shops that are in there, the tenants, and create a more diverse experience of the inner city. Because the inner city, like I said, is very separated in terms of functions on the ground floor, which means you get kind of islands that. For instance, there's this whole shopping area that works very well during the day, but then at night it turns into a quite terrible place to walk around, and a place where women would say they're afraid to walk around because of all the closed shutters. So in this Rotterdam at eye level strategy, we started looking for reconnecting all those networks, activating the ground floor uses, and that led to this series of books, in which the main that Robin van Weiler will speak about is one of the leading cases, and also Emil has written chapters in here about what are the mechanisms and to get this city at eye level feeling right. There's a lot of criteria in there that you can use in Southampton as well, and you can download the book for free on the cityateyeLevel.com website. And one of the key notions, like I said, is that we said, well, this is not public space, only the horizontal surface that the city owns. but public space is really the total experience, including the facades of buildings. So you need to work together as a city with the building owners, with the property owners, with the tenants who are in there. And then the most important part of the building, what you see the most and experience the most, is the ground floor. That's what we call the city at eye level, or the plinth, as we like to call it. One of the other keys that we found is that it's not just enough to only think about the design, the hardware, but you should really think about the programs, the activities, what we call the software, and there should be an organization behind it, an organizing principle for you to turn a street around, to turn a place around. That you don't just do that overnight. You don't just do that by implementing a new design. You need an organization, management organization to be active there. To give one of the examples of how that works, I would like to say a few brief things about the square that's at the heart of the city of Rotterdam, the Schouwburgplein, which more or less, logically speaking, should be a very vibrant square, but it was not. It did look very nice from the air. This is the Schouwburgplein over here, and it's all in all the landscape design books as an example. However, it's also leading the lists of the worst squares in the world, because on the ground, this is what you get. And unfortunately, we're not birds, so we're not up here. We're on the ground and experiencing this city at eye level. And then when I use this picture, people always say, "Yeah, but it's poor weather here." So this is what it looked like on a bright day. Really, no daily use on the square. It was a deserted place. We started a collaboration with the city of Rotterdam, with the cultural institutions around. There's a theater here, and there's a cinema, there's an expo center, there's lots of cafes next to the square. And we started a coalition between those parties to reprogram the square. We didn't have the money to change the kind of the hardware, the design of the square, but we could activate the square by adding new programs. So one of the first things we did is to put these sofas on the square that you can move yourself, but they're too big to put them on the back of your bike and steal them and take them home with you. So that people could determine for themselves how they would like to sit, either enjoy the sun or be in the shade, be alone or be with friends. And that was a kind of a first simple activation of the place. But then we also started programming activities like small music events. Somebody came with the idea to have yoga sessions on the square every weekend. And it started out with a small group of about 20 people that started this. But then as this repeated over time, it grew bigger and bigger. And eventually started drawing hundreds of people, kind of a new tradition on the square. Dance events, larger scale events on the square. And at the end of the day, we were organizing 72 activities. However, and drew in 150,000 users to the square, which was a great thing. However, these events would come and go, and so would the users. So when the event was over, the square was empty again. So we didn't have the daily use yet. And then we ran into these guys, and the city of Rotterdam really helped out here and stuck their neck out, who came up with the idea of putting an artificial grass carpet on the square. They call this the flying grass carpet. It's invented by Hank Design. If you would like one in Southampton, I'm sure they're happy to fly their flying grass carpet over, which adds a softer surface and some colors, compartmentalizes the square, makes this big, huge space more intimate. And before we knew it, on warm days, without organizing events, we would have a lot of people on the square just sitting down, relaxing, enjoying their days. Up to 80 groups of people enjoying the square we counted, which of course all these pictures are before COVID, and hopefully will be again post-COVID a couple of months from now, we hope. one of the other things I really like is it's a super diverse square with diverse kind of uses. You can come with a big wallet. You're very welcome with a small wallet as well. So there's lots of activities to be done, both paid and unpaid. So I think one of the secrets here behind this is to start testing, to start experimenting, and this room for experimentation is really what I like in a city like Rotterdam. There's a lot of room for that, to start testing what works, build on that, and then take on bigger investments. And I'm sure that Emil will tell a little bit more about how the city is going to invest into the square on a larger scale now. Another case, also very close to the city center, and one that Giles mentioned in Soho in Rotterdam, is where we could also start experimenting. This is an area that was standing empty about 8 years ago. The streets were like this, and we started working together with the building owners and the city of Rotterdam. Building owners, a large housing corporation called Facilitator, who bought up a lot of these business buildings in order to turn them into a new neighborhood, but it was the previous crisis and nothing was happening. So we proposed to start temporary use of those spaces, reactivate them, get new communities of social enterprises and manufacturers in. And we built this whole community of 100 co-investors in a year's time, activating the ground floors, the city at eye level, building the community, softening the surface, greening the surface, and working with the network. So this is the idea of placemaking, is that you work with the community for them to come up with crazy ideas that you wouldn't have been able to think about yourself. And for instance, this piece of land, we found a chef from the neighborhood who said, I would like to start my restaurant here. And by the way, I also collect trains. And we thought he was still in midlife crisis playing with his trains, but it really meant trains. And this is the train that Giles was referring to, where they had their vegan burger, because this was a vegan restaurant. This is the chef. He employed the unemployed kids from the neighborhood to work in the restaurant. And he turned the place in front of it into a space in front of it into a great place where people wanted to be, where he grew his own vegetables and gardens. And this is the sort of stuff that you could never write in the master plan beforehand. It's the serendipity of working with the networks and the room for experimentation. In the meantime, we also opened up the ground floors, activated them. This building turned into a hostel, people in front of it. This turned into this. And the yellow building that we were in was only 20% filled up. We filled it up with a community and opened up the ground floor, got a cafe in, but also worked with the city of Rotterdam on the public space in front of it, and turned this into a rain garden. And what we can see through this kind of work is that they seem small investments. They seem, and they are relatively small investments, but piling one on top of the other and then learning what works and then doing bigger investments, you actually increase the value of the place and of the property. We've calculated that in the course of around 5 years' time in working in this Soho area, we managed to increase the property value of those buildings of Havestede with about 20 million euros. So that's substantial money that can then be reinvested into bringing the area to the next phase, which is what is happening now. So I would invite you to look at these books, also hopefully for the use, for the benefit of Southampton. Giles, you were asking how to turn a street into a great place. There's lots of secrets and cases in here. I'm very happy to hear more from Olof, from Emil, and from Robin from the cases. There's lots of tools to be used also on the website of Placemaking Europe, which is the European network of people who are working like this on the city. So we would also love to invite you to join this network, very active Facebook group, and carry on the conversation with each other and learn from each other. So with that, I would like to thank you and give it back to you, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Hans. And I think it's a great introduction to some of the more informal initiatives that we've seen in the past years in the city of Rotterdam, with its own successes. I was wondering if there's any like clarifying questions. So I would love to keep the more sort of discussion parts to the very end of this program, if we have plenty of time for that, hopefully. But maybe some clarifying questions to better understand the story that was shared by Hans. Do please unmute if you'd like to ask a question. And if not, everything was perfectly clear. So, oh, Giles, yeah, please go.
And could you explain how the square, the Schouwburg Plain, is managed? So were the projects there implemented by the municipality or by another organization?
So that's a very good question. With the cultural institutions and with the help of the city of Rotterdam, the Schouwburgplein Association was started. It's an independent association responsible for actively programming the Schouwburgplein and funded by the municipality largely, and co-funded by money from events and sponsors. And it's a different way of looking at management of public spaces, because normally you have the management of keeping a place clean and safe, of course, which is what the city generally does, which is a great fundament, but it doesn't create a place. It creates a space rather than a place. If you want to turn that into a place, you do need the other angles of the triangles I was showing, not only the hardware, but also the software and the orgware, active programming and an organization behind it. So the active programming are the yoga sessions, and the organization behind it is this association who appointed what they call the square programming manager.
Thank you so much. I hope that answered your question, Giles. Then I would love to show the next poll question, which is more a matter of your positions after listening to the story of Hans. Pim, if you can pull up the poll. Hopefully it works smoothly this time. Yes. So listening to the story of Hans about the city at eye level in Rotterdam, what would you need to create a better city at eye level in Southampton? What would the city do good at to invest more in? Is it its plinths, ground floors of buildings? Maybe plinth is a relatively new term coming from Southampton. Is it a sense of ownership in the community, or those zealous nuts that there's nice surprises? Is it more qualitative public spaces for people, more balanced mix of functions within areas, less regulation so you can have more surprising results, or maybe more regulation so you could enforce better quality, or anything else? Please. Well, I think it's still at the viewing the poll results. So if it's, you have to relaunch the poll for people to be able to give their answers. Yeah, I think that's it. So please let us know what you think. Answers are coming in. We'll give it another 10 seconds. Okay, we can close the poll. Interesting. A nice and balanced result, I would say. Maybe that's also meaning that it should be a little bit of both of all of these answers. I did see somebody say other. Maybe that person would like to explain what is needed in Southampton, if you're willing to. Feel free to unmute your microphone if you would like to share. If not, we'll go to the next speaker.
I was just simply suggesting that perhaps we have an overhead travelator from the port to the station.
Ah, so a physical intervention. better connected. I'll take that as a yes, I guess. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, then next up, we can remove the poll again. Next up is Emiel Arends. I just introduced him as well as the senior planner of the city of Rotterdam, working on the 7 city projects. Emiel, can you please take us away to tell us a bit more about these 7 city projects?
Sure. Sharing my screen. Is this visible for everyone?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I'm going to start. It's a lot of information and it's a little bit larger scale intervention than Hans used to, but I think it's a really new approach for the city, or a new phase, as you are willing to call it. Well, this is the city from above. It's a harbor, city, river. We have a lot of water, water city. And on the left, you see the inner city, which Hans also explained. Thank you, Hans. That saved me the trouble of explaining our inner city. But this is a modernist, the birth of the modernist inner city, but it's also the start of the car invasion in the inner city. We have boulevards molded like the roughly molded around the ideas of New York at the time by Van Tra, the designer who did the inner city. So we end up with 2 lanes or even 4 or 6 lanes at certain points in the city with in our inner city with cars, the car-dominated inner city. One of the things that is really set into stone for people is that, well, Rotterdam is really easy accessible by car, the best reachable in the city, as if it's a quality. I don't know why, but it's something we need to work on. This is some of the examples of the boulevards going within the inner city itself. So in 2008 we started the City Lounge, and part of it was the PIN strategy we did with Hans, but that's not the story I want to tell you. This is about kicking out the cars, kicking out the cars, make an hospitable city. We are a lot of concrete, a lot of stone, a lot of cars, and we wanted to do something, flip it around a little bit. So we start densifying the inner city with a lot of houses, because we hadn't got a lot of residents. It bumped up from, let's say, 18,000 to 40,000 right now. So that's a big increase. And also in small interventions, just to see if it works, and if it works, we make it final. So that's something we did throughout the city center. Some examples. This is the really ugly Binnenwegplein, but this is how it looks right now. So it's redone with grass, a place to sit, etc. This is the main. Robin's going to tell you about it a little bit later. It looks like this now. And of course, our new central station is at last a place to visit the inner city as a pedestrian in a normal way without being killed or nearly killed 4 or 5 times in the old situation. So this is actually pretty good. Just gonna skip. This is the Westkade, just still an example. A lot of cars around the water, quality places, but also places to park, and it looks like this. So really short, the inner city. We did some monstrous work on it. We spent over 300 million euros on public space. We had an increase in residents. We have employees, visitors, shoppers. So on all signs are on green. But what's coming toward us? There is a need for more houses, especially affordable houses in the entire Netherlands. As Rotterdam, we say we do about 50,000
Sorry to interrupt, Emiel. Joanna, can you maybe mute your microphone as you're not speaking? We hear a bit of background noise. Thank you so much.
So on the left, you see a small map of Rotterdam with places where we could densify the city with more houses. So the 50,000 houses we are going to build in the next couple of years, it's not just houses. You need green, You need sport. You need a different take on mobility. You need more jobs, maybe. You need to think about climate change. So 50,000 houses means 88 Olympic swimming pools of water storage, to give you an idea, or 50 primary schools that you have to place somewhere in the city. So it's not just houses, it's everything. And on top of that, there are a lot of things changing in the city. So we have a mobility change, something we see in the inner city since 2008, that there are less and less cars, but the number of bikes are peaking right now. It's been increased with 177% in just 10 years. New forms of mobility, sharing of scooters, for instance, is something that's new and pretty big. There's also climate change. We cannot do the same as we did the last decades. We actually have to step up and do something about climate change. We have energy transition, which for Rotterdam is also an opportunity to transform the harbor to a more environmentally friendly surrounding, but it also gives energy to the city itself, biodiversity, etc., etc. So there are a lot of transitions that we are facing, and not just we, I think all cities, but this is on top of the 50,000 houses and all amenities we have to make. So we come to the core of my my talk. So our mayor and his alderman, or the college as we call them in Rotterdam, they said we have to do it a little bit bigger than we did. So they said we need city projects, or the big seven, that's how you call it. And there are big spaces, important spaces in the city they want to transform. And it's those places are not just randomly picked, but they are picked in a way that, you know, the picture with the yellow and green are the places with the more yellow and red, the less green space you have. The middle one on the bottom is about the shortage of water storage, and the one on the bottom right is, for instance, heat stress in the city, or urban heat island effect. So the projects actually have a way of not just making new public space, but also addressing all those other themes I just mentioned before. So if you see it like this, it's like a green axis through the city. Those are the big places that we are doing right now. The city is going to invest about 250 million euros on these places, and they expected to have some co-finance from the stakeholders around it, or the water boards in Rotterdam, or you name it. If someone is related to the project, we try to get also co-finance for the project as well, because the ambition is really high, and we have a lot of money that we can invest, but it's a team effort. So first project is the Hofbogen. Everyone knows the High Line in New York. We have one too, and it looks like this. It's going right through the 19th century townhouse areas on the north side of the city, and it's about 2 kilometers long. This is what it's going to be. It's going to be a new design from facade to facade, with it in the middle the High Line. And it's not just a High Line, it's also an aqueduct, so it can store massive amounts of water, which can be released in time of drought. Accessibility is a point here. Biodiversity, it's even made suitable for hedgehogs, to give you an idea. So just to treat it a little bit different and think a little bit different about it, and it will reduce the heat stress for about 6 to 7 degrees, to give you an idea. And it's going to be a real nice, big, green place in a location in the city that doesn't have too much green. Like I said, from facade to facade, and on top you see a picture about how the water system is working. So it's like a Roman aqueduct, but better suited for the city, and which gives water in time of dry periods, which is really good, because we have a lot of wooden poles where our house the foundations are from wood. And groundwater is really important to keep them wet, otherwise they rot and the houses will, well, not collapse, but it's not really good for the foundation of the house. Then the other one, it's Hofplein. Monopoly is a game we play everywhere in Rotterdam. It's Hofplein, Koolsingel, and Blaak. Those are the three. So this is one of our Monopoly places. And if you look, it's like a major roundabout with 6 or 7 lanes of asphalt with a lot of cars in the middle of a fountain where nobody can access it on a legal way. And it's not really a pretty place. It's something you use to travel through from to another location. It's not a place where you want to be. But if you really redesign this place, you can do something like this. So if you take out a lot of the asphalt, push back the cars, see it not as a roundabout, because actually it's a square, and you organize a little bit different, it looks like this. So this will be this. They're going to start with this next year. So it's next to the 7 city projects. One of the things is it needs to be stepping up the pace. So all the city projects should start within a year or 5 years. So they are phased, but this is one of the first that's going to start. So this is going to add about 60 to 70 trees. You can actually access the fountain. It's going to be much more a pedestrian way, and it connects several streets and places around the square that formerly weren't connected at all. The West-Blaak, also one of the city boulevards. This is you can see there are 2 lanes of asphalt on both sides of the green in the middle with parking places. And you actually can change that. Same picture, it's going to look a little bit like this. So a lot of the asphalt has been taken out, and it gives you a place for about 70 meters in the profile to redesign it and make more green, more trees, more places to stay, more places to meet. Also connects the other side of the streets way better than it's doing right now. And in terms of the climate, this is one that's for the bonus. It solves almost the entire water problem we have in the inner city. It decreases the temperature by about 7 degrees if you do it sort of like this picture. It reduces noise and air pollution. So on the north side of this type of boulevard, you actually can do other things in the buildings that are not legal right now. And if you add this up, and this is continuous in the inner city, we have about 60 football fields of space which we can transform like this, and that's unlike any other city in the Netherlands. So that's. Then we have the river parks. So you see the central station on the north side. So we talked about the inner city. And so if you step over the Maas, you have by number 2 and 3. Those are the tidal river parks we are making. So this is one. This is the Rijnhaven. It's now a really big basin where nothing happens. And it's going to be a basin where there's going to be a floating park on the water, where you actually can touch the water instead of standing on a quay 2 or 3 meters higher than the water level itself. And this finishing the ring around the basin, which is a walk for about 1.5 hours if you do it normally. There's going to be functions. There's even going to be a city beach if it's if the current allows it. They're still investigating it, but this is going to be the new central place on the south side of the river. And then we have the park de Maashaven. The park you see, and then the floor plan, you actually can see it. Everything that's green on the floor plan, it's now water. So we actually gonna take a little bit of the water of the really big basin of the Maashaven, and we're gonna transform it into a park that looks like the picture on your left, with 2 hills. The old iconic factories are still there. They're being reused with culture, working places. And this actually, this park gives about 17 households in Rotterdam big green in the vicinity of 5 to 10 minutes walk. That's something they don't have right now, but with this park they will have. So, and if you think back on Corona, you wanted to go outside, and if you start closing down the parks we have because it's too crowded, it doesn't mean the park isn't a success. It doesn't mean you have too little big green areas where people can go out, have a stroll, play soccer with your kids, stuff like this. So this is a really good place, well located around a lot of areas that doesn't have big green space available right now. And the other one is it's the tidal park next to the new football stadium of Fine Arts.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I move the mini rolls out of that shipper where produce is?
Can you use your microphone, please?
A lot of things, and then just move the mini egg.
My colleagues can mute the microphone for Aaron. Yes, please. Thank you.
All right. Well, this is the tidal park with the new stadium of Fine Arts, and it's really an extension of the island we have in the river down south. But it's also look at the pictures on the right side. It's not just a tidal park. It really complements a green belt. You can walk or jog or bike on the green stones in the south side of Rotterdam. So it's actually the last piece of the puzzle, so to say. Well, some of the benefits, if you add all this up, it's about heat stress. It's about a lot more trees in the city. It's about 20 football fields of green we make in the city with those plants. What it also does is create value for the properties around it. Water storage, bike storage, that is something we actually need, especially in the city. But it also gives you some health bonuses like a reduction of the noise and a better air quality. That's always better for health. And if you have green at less than a kilometer of a house, it leads to less obesity, depression, anxieties. So in all, the 7 projects are huge. They are scattered around Rotterdam, but more or less stringed through the city center. And it's, I think, a next step in the way we do city planning. And it is also part of the recovery program post-COVID. And that's the reason why it's why there's a turbo on the plan process to actually realize it as soon as possible. I leave it with this. So these are the again the pictures of the 7 city projects.
Thank you so much, Emil. And I think following the chat already a little bit, people are highly impressed by these bold green moves that the city of Rotterdam is taking. I know that you're conscious of time because you have to tell probably parts of this story very soon at the Citymaking Congress, one of the biggest conferences of Rotterdam. But do you have time for a clarifying question?
Sure.
Okay, so but for all the others, Emil won't be able to stick around to the very end. But if there's any questions following this exchange, he'll be happy to answer them at another moment. But maybe there's some clarifying questions right now.
Yeah, I see one from Tim. Can you put the time scales on the projects? The first one is starting next year, and that will be finished in 2 years. So within 3 years, we have a new half plan. If everything goes all right and nothing surprises happen, but the rest of the project are phased out because it's the same budget we get annually, so we have to phase it a little bit. The last one starts in 2025, and they are all going to be finished in 2028.
Wow. Question here by Philip. Is a green roof solar panels or plants? Oh, you're asking whether, yeah, so the green roofs. Do you understand the question, Emil?
Well, we do a lot with roofs at the moment in Rotterdam. We have a rooftop revolution going on, a lot of greening, but I think it's not or it's and. You can do both.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe there's actually really nice, we can share them at the end. There's really nice rooftop stories as well from the city of Rotterdam that address this rooftop revolution that's going on. More questions?
Well, 100% funded. Yes, the first amount, the 250 million euros, that is primary from the municipality itself. And we are aiming to get about 50 to 70 million co-financing from other parties, such as the water boards, which is going to contribute a lot because of the water storage we have. Rijkswaterstaat, the national, I don't know, water
Authority.
party, I don't know. They with the free parks that are in the river, because that's their responsibility, and they have an obligation to make more nature along the main water courses in the Netherlands. So that's a big party. And don't forget all the project developers and people who own buildings that are contributing to those projects as well. And it's not just money, it's also time. And that correlates back to what Hans said. It's not just the hardware you have to think of. It's also a story about the organization, to get your stakeholders committed and engaged to actually make something of the project, because you can make a really nice public space, but it actually needs programming, care, maintenance, and a sense of ownership. So that's equally important, I think.
Beautiful. So another question by Christopher: how did you sell these schemes to the public? I think it's a highly interesting question here. Was there resistance in moving away from the car invasion of yesteryear, for example?
There are always people that are questioning the pestering of cars, so to say. It's not pestering, by the way, but it's not. It's we don't need all those cars, essentially. And they take up a lot of space, which you can use for something else. And it sells pretty easy, to be honest. If you have our alderman wanted wow pictures, so we gave him wow pictures, and he actually sold it pretty good. There is, I think, only compliments. And on schemes itself, if you're going to the actors around one of those places, they can be in discussion. Why do you do this? Why can't you do this? But in general, it's really positive. It received really positive critics in Rotterdam.
Yeah, that's interesting. But that's because you have the beautiful pictures, but you really get to showcase the alternative to the car, right? So what do you get in exchange? That makes it probably easier to transition into that. A question by Mark: who owns the land, and how does the city influence private landowners to buy into this vision?
Well, it's all the land is municipality owned. If you have about boulevards of roundabouts or squares, that's municipality owned. Well, one of the 7 places is the Schouwburgplein. I don't think it was in the presentation, but it's one of the places. So we did a lot of experiments and temporary programming. And we formed an alliance with all the stakeholders Hans just described in his story. But now we actually have a lot of money to do a really nice permanent square, and we do it together with all the participants. So it's not just money, it's also knowledge, programming, and sometimes it's money. Some of the parties are willing to spend money because it helps their business case as well. The water boards need to have extra water storage in the city of Rotterdam. If we can provide for that, the water boards are willing to pay a part of the design or the design process instead. So that's how.
What is then what are the drivers of this buy-in of all the other stakeholders? Is like how do you influence that? Is that good conversations?
Well, sometimes it's just good old regulation by everyone who's building around places like this. Property value goes up, and if you want to redevelop or renovate, you actually have to pay more to the municipality, which indirect co-finance the project as well. But again, the best way is to sit on the table with all the developers before or in the beginning of some projects and talk what we can do for each other, because in the end they are also part of the scheme. It's not just the public space, it's also the program within the buildings, but in the end everyone is contributing in a way.
Beautiful. I see I skipped a question when so many questions were coming in. So going back to Sapphir's question, what are the main challenges you face when pushing these plans through?
Well, time is a thing. The pressure is on. We are being there's a whip behind the project teams to get it done. And we need to for certain projects we actually need to find certain stuff out before we can make a final plan. The pictures are looking really nice, but some of the plans actually have something to deal with. For instance, what's happening underground with cables and the sewage and the metro lines, and so you can draw trees, but there actually needs to happen a lot of extra research. So I think that is one of the things that actually is going to press the time a little bit. And of course, stakeholder engagement always takes time, which is good, but it takes time and you never know where it ends. And I think more than half of all the projects still need to start up a stakeholder engagement program. So we'll see.
Yeah, nice. 2 final questions before we're going to let you go, Emil. Brad is asking, presumably the city makes wide use of water taxis.
Yeah. I'm not sure how it is in the COVID period, but before that you actually could see them frequently. It's not a public transport service, so it's privately owned, like a taxi. So you actually have to pay for it. And if you want to go fast through the city, I think the metro is better than the water taxi. But if you want to have a stunning view, you take the water taxi. Mm-hmm. So, but we have what we do have, and that's publicly transport, are boats that connects all the city along the Maas and towards the port. So that actually is pretty handy. So.
Beautiful views from the water in Rotterdam. Final question by Steve. What role does central government play in all these processes?
In those 7 city projects, none at all at the moment. So we do this as a city. We are talking to them because they also have money and maybe they have subsidies or pilot projects where we can tap into. But this is not coming from the central government. This is from the city itself.
Is that a benefit or a missed opportunity?
No, I think it's of it as a benefit because I know the municipality isn't always quick and it's sometimes a pretty slow organization, but I think it's still 10 times quicker than our national governments and more concrete. And I think we know better what's playing in the city than the central government. So I think this is better.
Yeah, allows you to move quickly and adapt to the local reality. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Emil. And I wish you the best of luck at the Stadmakers Congress. And we have one final poll for the participants to see what we've learned from your story about what will be needed in Southampton. Again, asking my colleague to put the poll up. So for Southampton to become more climate resilient and recover from the COVID-19 crisis as a healthier city, the most important investments would be in, well, less car dominance, more cycling and foot traffic. Would it be more trees and green spaces, public spaces with climate adaptive qualities, better waste management, facilitating the circular economy, or all of the above, or anything else that we've missed? I think results are coming in. I think if it's one thing that we've learned from Emil's presentation is that an integrated approach to all of these can be highly influential. Seeing if that's also what you think. Another 5 seconds to finish the poll. And we can close the poll now. Indeed, 60% of you say all of the above. Still wondering what the other is though. What have we missed? Someone would like to raise their voice in sharing? Feel free to unmute your microphone if you like. Or else we're going to continue with the next speaker. Thank you for the poll, Pim. And we'll get on to the next speaker. So next up is Olof van der Wal. He's director at SKAR Ateliers, and he will tell you much more about what SKAR does. So I'm going to give the floor to Olof. Are you here?
I am here.
Yes, great.
Thank you.
I'll share your presentation. Let me give.
Thank you. And thank you, all of you, for inviting me again. It was lovely to have been able to speak with you the last two instances. And although this is me talking to a screen and you're all looking at the screen, I somehow feel that you're close, which is good. Though I would definitely want you to come to Rotterdam and experience what I'm talking about, what Hans is talking about, etc. Because that I think is the best way to feel and see what we are talking about. So Giles, you had 3 questions, and one of them is how to make spaces for culture. I think I'll go into that, though somehow I believe that Hans already answered the question, because every public space is a space of culture, I would say. So what is it that I have been working on with SKAR? You might say that I believe that culture in any city, in any place, is mostly the foundation for culture, that is, are artists and designers. And any city that is able to house artists and designers, I think is a city that has immense potential for culture. And so I would focus my presentation upon that. Could you move on to the next, Charlotte? And I've been working on these studios for 5 years now. In these 5 years, I've come to understand that it's about 3 themes. Basically, it's about affordability. Any type of spaces that you have for artists and designers should be affordable. If not, then they will move out. That is a very plain and basic thing that any city needs to look at. If you want to have a good space, if you want to have a good cultural space, be able to create affordable spaces, working spaces for these artists and designers. If not, then it will be depleted. The other thing I think is that you may, as a city, ask from these spaces to be visible, to be present, to share the creativity that they are housing. And that's what we've been working on as well. And that's what the Wasserij is all about as well. But the thing that I found most interesting is that it's something that you can't do on your own. It's about partnership. You should be able to partner with the city, with others like STIPO, etc., but also with the neighborhood. These spaces, these artist spaces, need to somehow take root in the city, in the direct environment. And if you are not able to manage that, I think that you cannot appreciate the full value of creative spaces. Charlotte, could you move on to the next, please? So it's about a partnership. I think that's what I've been working on these years. It's not something that the city does on their own. It's not something that I do on my own. It's about how can I move with the city? How can the city ask me what they need, and how can I ask the city what the artists and designers need? And it's also about thinking how to accommodate these spaces. In these last 5 years, I've had to accommodate. I've had to build a strategy for growth as well. Since Rotterdam is growing and since real estate prices are soaring, it is very difficult to maintain the affordability. We have a norm for the affordability, which I keep the same throughout the years, which is 52 euros per square meter per year. That is what any autonomous artist is able to pay for, but it's way less than any commercial value that you can get. So it is key to be able to maintain this. Yet I've had the possibility with the city to double the amount of spaces that we have. We've grown from 20 buildings to more than 45 buildings right now, which is huge and which shows that the city really is interested in creating these spaces for culture. Then there is a sort of a payoff, and the payoff is that we ask all these spaces to be visible. We ask them to be partly public as well. Artists sometimes tend to be very private, which is good, but what we want to have is spaces that also accommodate some publicness. And that is where also Hans' stories comes in, because especially in the plinth at eye level, that is where we want our buildings to be interesting for the outside world, interesting for art lovers, interesting for anyone visiting the place. So I think that visible creativity is valuable creativity, and I will come to that later, but it definitely helps. And it definitely helps also the negotiations with the city and with others. What we also have done is that artists are just like normal people. They want to work at the places that are most popular. But since space making is about adding value, we want to also add value to those sites in the city that are less interesting, maybe spaces that are more prone to be regeneration areas, and by creating interesting spaces for them, we also might be able to help the city develop these regeneration areas. But there's a catch. And one of the words that frequently comes to mind in Rotterdam when I'm talking about this is gentrification. And gentrification is something that is less valued by a lot of people, especially a lot of artists, because basically they think it means that by with their value adding, they have helped prices go up, and then after a few years, the prices are too steep for them to be able to remain there. So one of the things that I've been focusing on with the city and with others as well is that if I'm about to add value with artists and designers in any neighborhood, then I'll be doing that permanently. Because it's not just about getting spaces on a certain value level, it's about adding the value permanently. I think that's what any city, any neighborhood needs. Charlotte, next one. So we've experienced a lot of demand in Rotterdam. As I told you, this is a bit of an older thing, and I guess that you won't be able to understand everything. But what I'm implying here is that when I started 5 years ago, there was some demand in artist spaces. We see now that since real estate prices are soaring, that the demand is only growing. So for each studio that I've been able to add to the city, I had 2 more artists that need a new studio, which means that I'm constantly lagging behind. And that is something that the city also sees, because they find that having artists is important. So the city as well is stepping up their the speed of adding studio spaces to SKAR. Charlotte? So it's not just about spaces, because I found that it's also about how do people work. When people think about culture, when people think about artists, etc., it very quickly is about what they make, and it's about the quality that people are discussing and whether people like it or not. But I think I tend to focus more on the economic possibilities for artists. I'm not quite sure how it is in Southampton, but here we see that although we value artists and their work very much, they don't seem to earn a lot. And partly it's because we tend to neglect the economic chain that artists and designers need. So what we're focusing on is now on getting buildings, getting these studio spaces that are not just individual spaces, but that are somehow a system on their own, that are somehow targeted on a specific group of artists. In the case of the Wasserij, it's fashion artists. And fashion artists do not just want to work with other fashion artists, they need to have tailors. They need to have people being able to sell what they are making. So it's about creating a sort of an economic culture around fashion, and that's what we've been trying to do there. But also what we found out, it's not just about the professional artists and designers. It's not just about the tailors and the photographers, etc. It's also about education. We need to educate people in order to become better tailors. So what we did in the Wasserij is we housed not just designers, artists and tailors, but also a school now. And we're going to house possibilities for people to be able to sell their products. But this combination, this economic chain, this can only work with the type of people that are interested and able to work together. That's a specific type of designers and artists. I found out that there is another type of artist that is more helped by being able to maximize their own concentration. So what I have been trying to do is to somehow level specific types of artistic spaces. One of them you might call the clusters. Those are the spaces in which networking is mostly most interesting and mostly needed. But all others would be, I would call the cloisters. Those are the spaces in which individual artists can maximize their concentration and thus create the best work. Mixing them, I found out, isn't going to work. So if you really want to create something that helps these artists and designers and thus helps the city, then you should be able to also see what type of working spaces they need and how can you provide these working spaces. Next, Charlotte. But I guess that in the case of the Wasserij, it's about creating some sort of a hub. And this is a hub which is in Dutch. I will be able to translate it later, of course, but this is a hub which is centered around a certain discipline. In this case, it's fashion. But then you see that there is not just a chain, but there's a sort of a daisy chain of functions and people. you can program, you can meet up there, you can have a drink there, you can buy your things there, you can have things made there. So it's a sort of a subculture, a sub-economy on its own. And what I'm also working on now with the city and with a private investor is that we're going to acquire the piece of ground next to it, which is now a parking lot, and turn it into a park. Because we want to add green, because we want to make this a nicer place. But also because we think that it helps the designers and all working in the wasserij in their work, in being able to find an audience, being able to find buyers for what they do. So it's in the end, it's about creating more opportunities for the people working there. But the byproduct is that it's going to be a lovely place for all of the neighborhood and maybe all of the city. Charlotte? And now this, I haven't been able to translate yet, but I was interested in what sort of value adding do we have when we have a space for artist and studio spaces. And I've asked an agency to help me with this. And well, to be quite brief, when we have these spaces for at least 15 years, so for a longer period, then you can see that any euro I'm investing into the building has a turnover about a multiplier of 24 euros, which is spent over and over and over again. This astounded me. I think this is huge. But also because I need to have people working on the buildings and others are working as well. We found that any site, any specific site that we create for an artist or a designer generates an additional 0.6 jobs in the helping us keeping the building in the surroundings. Well, it adds additional jobs, 0.6 additional jobs, which I think it's huge. So a large part of what we are doing is funded by the municipality. We have been able to acquire these buildings for feasible, relatively cheap, you might say. So I was also interested in what does what does the city gets from all of this. It so turns out that from all the 24 euros that is part of the multiplier, 11 euros are going directly into the pockets of government and city government. So if you look at this way, something which seems to be not so profitable, something which seems to be a type of economic activity which is withering, you might say, suddenly is going to be very profitable, and you see the value adding effect that we have. And well, we only just last year had this investigation. I was quite surprised by the findings of it, and it does help me quite a lot in my negotiations with the city and in the partnership that I talked to you about at the beginning. So that somehow concludes my presentation. We have just one slide yet. This is more of a dream. In 2020, you see that we are a bit scattered throughout the city, but I feel that we're going to add a lot of new clusters and a lot of new cloisters throughout the city, mainly mainly on the south side of the river. Not just because there are so much artists and designers, but simply because the city needs it and it adds value to the neighborhoods. That just about concludes it. Charlotte, back to you.
Thank you so much, Olof. I believe that was a very inspiring story for the people in Southampton to hear about your organization's role in facilitating the creative economy and also thinking so thoroughly about its economic and societal impact. Let me quickly see in the chat or when people unmute their microphones if they like to ask some clarifying questions to you. Let me see. I see you're a legend, Olof, and thanks, Olof. It's a great example for us.
Giles is putting up his hand.
Yeah, okay. Giles, go ahead.
It's a question I think we asked you in person, Olof, when we saw you. Do you rent or buy the buildings that are then used for the creatives and the businesses?
Both. Roughly half of the buildings I have are owned by SKAR and the other half I rent. The thing about renting is that I do not rent them for a short term. So whenever I do so, I negotiate at least 10 to 15 years, and thus I'm able to negotiate a lower rent. And that's because usually artists are growing very attached to their spaces. They need the spaces define their work, and the thing is that I decide to buy them mostly whenever investments will be too high to be able to get an affordable rent.
A nice mixture depending on the circumstances, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions for Olof?
Yes, it's Brett. I love art. It's my thing.
Go ahead.
I don't know much about it, but those of you that know me know that.
Mm-hmm.
Olof, I thought I was intrigued by this, and Giles and I have discussed this offline before. Do you ever get your artists, your famous artists, to sell their art and contribute to your work? Because I would.
Not yet, but
you should. You've got some really great artists there, and we could perhaps, I said to Sandy, or Sandy just exchanged a thing to me to say, yeah, maybe the city is up for that kind of art exchange, this cultural exchange, as we bid to become a city of culture.
I would definitely have this art exchange with you as well.
Yeah, you should. Both Chris and Sandy are on this call, so I'm sure that they'd be delighted to hear from you. But I don't speak for them. In fact, I only speak for me.
Well, send them to me, then they will speak for themselves. But yeah,
well done.
Yeah, I would love that. I would also love to hear from them about how artists and designers are coping with COVID right now, because that is a main concern for me these days. Most of them see their income plummeting, and we are trying to somehow try to. Right now I'm involved in a think tank in which we try to ask the Rotterdam city to create their own New Deal for the culture, a bit inspired by the Roosevelt New Deal, because we feel that a huge investment is needed. And throughout the Netherlands and probably Europe, you see that while we do value art, we tend not to pay too much for it. And if you have any good ideas on your side, I would definitely love to hear them.
I guess nobody should pay too much for art, and it should be there for everybody to see. One of the great strengths here, and you're probably aware of this, is that a lot of art is free and you can visit it for free no matter where you come from.
Yeah.
A lot of them are in cities, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the more that we can define ourselves through art and through music, just generally, I think it makes us better as people.
I think you're right. I think you're right, but I also think that artists then should have the ability to earn a decent living from it, and that's a bit hard right now.
Well, as I say, you've got some great old masters there. Sell some.
Can I ask another question? I think part of the success of this story is having an organization the likes of SKAR.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you've really introduced what type of organization SKAR is, because that could be a key for Southampton to look into as well. I don't know if there's similar organizations in Southampton at the moment, but maybe you should say a little bit more about what kind of organization SKAR is and how it works.
SKAR is a foundation, so it's not a profit-based, and it's been founded in, I think, the end of the 80s by the city of Rotterdam, and then made independent. And our sole mission is to accommodate spaces for the creative class, and especially the creative class that isn't able to rent commercial spaces. It used to be only for artists, the painters and let's say the more classical artists, but we have now turned it into the larger proportion of the creative class, because we see that is booming right now, and also people that are teaching themselves to be artists, or the street artists, are more and more coming to the spaces of SKAR. Does that roughly answer your question, Hans?
I would be curious if there's a similar organization in Southampton, actually. I don't know who could answer that. Jazz, do you have an idea?
Yeah, emphatically, it's Dan Crow who's on the call, and Dan and I have been messaging, because I think he's definitely the equivalent in Southampton. I'm sure colleagues would agree that.
Giles, hello. That's very kind of you to say, Giles. Olof, you are inspiring.
Thank you.
Absolutely inspiring. Thank you very much for sharing your journey with us. Really good stuff.
Olaf, this is Brett again. Don't you think that someone, like one of your artists, can't remember his name now, Bram Balm, I think it is. He did some lots of work in and around cities. Get him to do something in Rotterdam. Bram it is, I think it is. Get him to do something around Rotterdam and then sell that. Because I think he's a big artist now.
Any thoughts on that? Olof or Dan, maybe?
I'm not quite sure what you mean, Brad, because I always believe that the work of an artist is for himself to sell. So I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Oh, I'm just saying that as a Dutch artist, and because you need funding for some of the work you're doing, you might be able to pick up the phone on him in just the same way I might pick up the phone on an industrial organization or the city and try to do something with them. You might want to do the same with someone who actually specializes in art around cities, and he's just one guy I recollect.
Mm-hmm.
And as he's a Dutchman, I think he is. I think he's Berlin based, but I think he's a Dutchman. He might want to contribute to your work. That's all I'm suggesting. It's just a suggestion. Okay. I'm just a sales guy, so I'm just trying to help you.
Look into it. The thing is that funding, acquiring the Wasserij, for example, was done by partly by funding we got from a bank, and partly by a philanthropist. So there are philanthropists, and that definitely is something that you need, because otherwise you're not able to get affordable rents. So there's always this sort of basket of several types of funding that we still need. And partly, also, of course, the city also is subsidizing SKAR.
Great suggestions, Brad. Matt is saying, as a music charity in Southampton, we would love to explore connections with music organizations, both commercial and community-driven, in Rotterdam. So that's a nice connection to be built there. And Gemma is asking, is any of your work with artists and creative a legacy impact from Rotterdam's year as European Capital of Culture in 2001? This is especially relevant because Southampton is preparing a bid to become a capital of culture themselves. So any connections to that, Olof?
Well, that was a long time ago, I guess. I've only been working here for 5 years. So, and I think that my predecessors didn't work the way I do now. So I don't think you could say there is a legacy impact. But I think that the visibility of arts, the central role of art and artists in this in the city, that definitely is a legacy of 2001, and I should you should focus on that as well.
Yeah, long-term impact. Thank you so much, Olof. We're gonna move into the poll to collect your thoughts on what the creative economy in Southampton could use. Next one. And I would like to say that we're a little bit, what happens with these highly interesting stories is that we're a little bit behind time. So I am going to take the liberty to cut the little coffee or tea break that I initially planned. But if you want to do a refill of anything or do a quick toilet break, please do it now, because we're going to continue with the amazing story of Robin van Weiler very soon. But use these few minutes to, maybe it's time to go grab a beer or a glass of wine, better than a coffee, to enjoy the final story of today. And if you want to stick around, please answer the poll if you like. And then Olof, you will stay around, and we might address some final questions at the very end of this program, hopefully. And hopefully when parts of this delegation will join us in Rotterdam, we can get to experience the Wasserij, have a beer there, maybe enjoy even the outside space by then, or at least experience the fashion and wonderful creatives that are there. I'm gonna give it another, poll is closed. So in order to encourage the creative economy, I didn't introduce the question, sorry, my bad. In order to encourage the creative economy in Southampton, we mostly need new business models. 15% of you thought so. Pioneers who show what can be done. Slightly more of you thought so. New policies, no new policies needed, I see. Coherent network between creatives, some of you, but most of you thought all of the above, and the integrated approach as Olof just presented this to us. Very logical results of the story that was just presented. Thank you so much, Olof. And with that, I would love to close this poll and continue to the last but certainly not least story of today by Robin van Weiler, who is the owner of Van Weiler Investments, and he will tell us a little bit more about his work, his previous work, but most particularly his work on the Maas, one of the best streets in the city of Rotterdam. Robin, are you here?
Yes, very much so. I don't see myself, but I don't mind. Let's see what I can do with view. 1 second. Gallery view. Yes, there I am. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robin van Weiler. I have planned the following. Usually when I talk about the Maas, an hour is the least I need, but now I got only 20 minutes. So I wrote everything down, concise, not having the risk of forgetting things or going from A to B. And at the end, I think, oh, I should have said those important elements of the story. So what I agreed with Charlotte is there will be the first slide of my presentation. Yes, you won't, it doesn't change. So this will be during my presentation. I'll give my presentation, just listen very carefully. And after my presentation, which takes about 12 to 13 minutes, we'll go to the rest of the slides, which you then probably much better recognize. So I will stop my video and I'll start with my story and I'll be back in 12, 13 minutes. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to meet some of you again, now virtually, and welcome newcomers. My name is Robin van Weiler from Rotterdam. A brief introduction. 44 years in the real estate business in various positions. Started as a residential real estate agent, switched to the commercial real estate business at Zadelhof, initiated in the 80s the international partnerships, which led to DTZ, now Cushman & Wakefield, and started the corporate advisory practice. After 10 years, I left DTZ and founded Prologis, the US-based logistics real estate developer investors, and I started their business in Europe. In Kings Park, a very well-known British real estate developer, we bought Kings Park as one of the first companies. After 10 years, I left Prologis and decided to work for the family foundation I established, where all our real estate investments are in. STIPO asked me again to prepare a presentation for you, 20 minutes max, to share with you how I initiated in 2001 concept for the transformation of a deteriorated, dull, but well-located street from the 50s in the very heart of Rotterdam into one of the most appreciated places to be now. To summarize 20 years of continuous work in 20 minutes is impossible, as I already said. It usually takes me an hour. Consequence is that I cannot share with you a lot of things that made it happen. My plans for the main were not planned and started with the purchase of a block of 4 buildings directly behind the World Trade Center in Rotterdam. The name of the street is Maint. We're talking about 8,000 square meters of offices and 2,000 square meters of retail. They are named the Minerva Huizen, Minerva, the goddess of trade. Owned by a life insurance company who built the first one in 1938. And they wanted to sell them after the insurance company was sold. These beautiful Minerva houses were in a very poor condition. A lot of the original details disappeared, but the buildings are still very attractive, is what I think. And they deserve to be restored to their old glory. And I was going to do that. Kissing a sleeping beauty awake. It's a rare ensemble. Minerva is one of the very few buildings that survived the bomb raid of the German war, May 14, 1940, that burned out the heart of the city. And unfortunately, Southampton has a similar experience. 3 of the 4 buildings are of a well-known architect. Each building has a signature of the time it has been designed. Pre-war, during the war, and post-war resurrection architecture from 1949. You can visit our website, minervahuis.nl. You can see a lot of pictures and publications. Sorry, they're in Dutch. Because of the restoration, I was frequently on the Maint, a street I actually did not visit often before my Minerva House involvement. The Maint was a famous temp agency street with more than 20 of them and 10 travel agencies. I was there when I was a student, but I have not been there for years because I already have a job. When I bought the Minerva houses, 9 shops were occupied by travel agencies and temporarily employment agencies like American Express, Randstad, Kelly, Manpower, etc. But the bank liked them a lot because they are a very strong covenant for my mortgage. But those users started to irritate me more and more. There are no shops and add no atmosphere to the street. On the contrary, they are offices. Close the blinds and switch off the light on Friday afternoon and open again on Monday morning. And during the weekend, it's the busiest time of the week. I consider them black holes that strangle a street. I decided to get them out, terminate the lease at the first expiration date, and replace them with shops. Shops that add diversity and atmosphere to the street. No chains, no franchises, but family-owned businesses from Rotterdam. When you rent from us, you must comply with our policy, meaning all the window frames cannot be changed. They must be charcoal black of my RAL number. No big illuminated signs, but only in separate letters and numbers. No flashing television screens and no anti-burglar fences. And the shop window illuminated till 12 p.m. because it gives a lot of feeling for safety on the public street. It's impossible to terminate leases with real retail shops. The legislation in the Netherlands protects shop owners to an extreme level. But according to the law, a travel agency and temp agency is no retail. Retail is only retail if you can buy something and physically take that with you. American Express was in the shop since 1954. Retail zoned with even a retail lease contract, but again, is no retail, so no protection. And that gave me the possibility to get them out. They went to court because they wanted to stay and thought I was only interested in a higher rent. I explained them that it is not the case. My plan is to give this originally attractive street as it once was back to the citizens of Rotterdam. A vivid, safe, attractive street where you like to be. Amex could stay if they have turned their offers into a nice shop and comply with my policy. I suggested how to do that, with of course opening hours in the weekend and on Friday night. They refused, made me a very high lease offer, more than triple what they originally paid to stay, which I refused, and they left. It took months of vacancy before I found my ideal candidate. A fourth generation family-owned retailer, Van Os Lederwaren, impossible for you to pronounce, specialized in high-quality purses, wallets, and suitcases, with their own repair department in the basement. In 2 years' time, 3 other retailers followed, all local heroes, family-owned and from Rotterdam. Very important to know is that 80% of the retail real estate on the Main is owned by 8 owners, all family investors from Rotterdam. I approached them and offered to do the same for their buildings as I did with mine, for free, but my reward is that I choose a new shop after they got one empty. And they agreed because they had nothing to lose. Result, I represented all the important real estate owners and became a player you could not neglect and was in charge. The city noticed the change, realized they cannot achieve these themselves and contact me. It was the start of a cooperation, but one thing was very clear from the start. I am 100% independent and do not need the city for anything. No money, no special treatment. Basis for the cooperation is that we have an aligned interest and they agree with my concept for the street to accomplish my goal. They agreed with a smile. The city wants to improve the public space with a new design, renew the sewages and the city heating pipes, but at a price. 50% of the parking places should disappear. A political issue the shop owners disliked, of course. And it took me 2 years of negotiations before we agreed how it would look. With a very high level of detail they never experienced before. I want no lamp poles in the street, which always stand in the way, but 3 hanging light ornaments. And no old tree will be cut. The location of each bicycle clip is on the drawing. The size and the type of the new trees, and most important, the logistics of this vast operation need to be agreed upon before. So what happened? The street never closed down, or if inevitable, for the shortest time possible and always announced in advance. This way of managing public works was completely new to them. A street that doesn't close is of the interest of the shopkeepers. And we agreed to form a team, call it a committee, with representatives of shopkeepers, the police, municipality, traffic department, a marketing communication expert and myself. And we met every 2 weeks and detailed minutes are made. Open the website with all the progress and planning available to the public. I demanded every day at least 10 pictures made of the progress of the works by the city. It ended up with more than 1,000 pictures on a 64 gig USB stick. Extremely helpful to look back now things have been done, now under the pavement. Critical for the smooth process is the agreement signed with the aldermen. No change at all can be made before the prior approval of the committee, read me. Planning such a complex work is very difficult. When the city told me that their planning was rock solid and completion was guaranteed on November 4, during the meeting, I called in their presence the alderman and agreed with her to open the street on November 5. 5 years and 8 new shops later, people started to sense that something was happening in the street. The atmosphere changed. After 15 years, the last temp agency has left. Also, no more travel agencies, about 35 in total. The street is flourishing as never before. But the butcher is still there, and a small sewing machine shop also, and a lot of new small-scaled, high-end fashion brands, bars, and restaurants have opened. Mission accomplished. But what I did not realize at that time is a consequence far more important than the successful complete makeover. My initiative prevented the street from a further decline. In 2008-2009, temp and travel agencies started to close down their shops due to the internet. That, in combination with the economic crisis that hit us hard. If the Maint would not have been improved and be so popular by then, no quality shop would have decided to open a new shop and fill the voids the temp and travel agencies created. Result would have been a lot of empty shops nobody wants to rent because the street had that unattractive image. Maybe the low-cost €1 shops, which you don't want to have. The success of the Maint has its disadvantages. Now I do not need to convince people of the hidden treasure of the street. Maint is a hype now. Everybody wants to open shop there. The only shopping street in town with no vacancies. Pandora's box is open, and who decides to rent a shop is beyond my influence if it is not in one of my buildings or my friends' buildings. Rents were low compared to the A1 shopping areas, but they're rising fast to a level shops can make no money anymore. That's something I don't like. Since I started in 2001, a lot has positively changed at the Maint, but that is not forever. You must follow trends very closely and act accordingly. Internet sales and change of the way the consumer shop these days have a serious impact. And as an investor in retail, you must adapt to these trends and reinvent yourself. Family-owned shops I was focusing on have disappeared. Brand stores have taken over, but the fashion retailers close shops worldwide and intensify their sales in their web shops. And the corona pandemic has made this very visible and accelerates this process. When we had a fire in the shop, unfortunately the fourth generation Persis shop, I agreed with our tenant that he would not come back because he was not a long-term survivor. We had a number of quality retail candidates, but decided to choose for Polestar, the high-end electric car part of Volvo. They want to open showrooms in the 4 big cities, and the Maint was a top priority. Why Polestar? It represents the future of cars, has an Apple Store-like appearance, complies with all my demands of the Minerva House, but most importantly, Polestar attracts about 500 to 700 potential buyers to the showroom per week. A high net worth target group of spenders you want to have on the Maint because they will stay there for a few hours and shop and eat. And that is very good for the other retailers. Well, this is my presentation in 15 minutes. I'm very proud of what has been achieved and the way we did it, but understand it needs continuous focus and adaptation to the change of the behavior of the ever-changing consumer. I've given this presentation in Stockholm 6 years ago and ended with a question to the audience, which is still very valid. The question was, how can we continue the process and prevent that the past will repeat itself? Thank you. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much, Robin. And I guess we can go into that question. I will ask you to repeat it once we go into the discussion, because I think it's a relevant question for all of us to address. But first, I assume that people after this inspiring story are very curious to see
I promised to show the,
exactly.
We're going to show pictures. So now you recognize more. Some of you have not been in Rotterdam. So this picture is where it's all about, which is atmosphere. This picture hangs in all, the previous picture, this picture hangs in all our buildings at the entrance. because at the moment you see this picture, you start with a smile, and it's very important that people feel kind of good when you enter into our building. So this is our kind of trademark picture. Next one, please. Well, this was the main before the Minervahuis was built. This is a picture from the 1920s. Next one, please. This was just before, this was 1938. You see City Hall with the tower on your left, in the middle of the post office, and down under the very big, how do you call it, the Beurs. And behind that, very small, the Minervahuizen, which the large part of them were also bombed in the Second World War, but Minervahuis 1 survived the bombing. Next one, please. Well, we saw already the picture in the presentation before. This is how Rotterdam looked. Next one, please. You see the red arrow. That is a red arrow. It's a very modest arrow. That is Minervahuis 2, which is the first building which was completed in World War II in 1941 with the approval of the Germans. It was not a residential building. It were offices to give the companies who lost their offices another opportunity to start up again. Next one, please. Minervahuizen. These are the Minervahuizen I bought. This is part of the block in 1953. By then, all the old elements were still on the building. Unfortunately, later everything has disappeared, and I've put back all those original elements back on the building, like the signing that says Minervahuis. You see them back now again, but it is all new copied originals. Next one, please. So this is what happened before my time. It was terrible. The colors, plastic signage, it was, well, very ugly. Next one, please. And this is how it is now. So all this is quite an old picture. The BAD sign has also disappeared. Next one, please. Here you see all the old signage, also the signage before with that, I don't know what kind of, that greenish, those greenish colors, terrible. Yes, like this. Well, I hate that. And that is even worse. Well, you won't find anything of that anymore. Also this one, and this is how the street looks today. So what I've been doing is I've been concentrating tremendously on the outside space. So designing the streets, where the trees will be, how the lamp ornaments will be, till the minutest detail. Next one, please. Oh, this is how we are now at the main, well now, before Corona. And hopefully in due course, it will be back in the nice setting we are now getting used to. Next one, okay, that's nice. And here it is, the Polestar showroom. Looks very trendy. And of course, I would prefer to have a retailer in my shop, which would really survive for the next years. But this is a retailer, kind of car retailer, who does it very nicely. It looks splendid. People are surprised. You don't expect that in the shopping street. Of course, I don't want to have 3 or 4 of them, but this one of them, maybe 2. That's nice enough. Next one. This was the last one. Yes. Okay. I see that I forgot to switch off my video. Sorry. Yeah. I'm back again.
That was it, Robin. Thank you for the great images and the beautiful story about the main. Looking at the audience, if there's any clarifying questions for Robin. Let me see in the chat.
Giles is waving.
Yeah, Giles, go ahead, please.
Would Robin recommend the carrot or the stick when it comes to creating a great place?
Robin, what do you think? Carrot or stick? Forcefully? Both. Okay. It was a multiple choice question. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, maybe you can give an example of both a carrot and a stick, Robin, in the case of the main.
Well, I think the stick is the process. the municipality was not used at all to run a project like a company. This is a large multi-million project, and they were the people who work at the city are just not used to doing that. Everybody had their own small part. They did a small part and they leave. The next one does a small part. So there was no integral approach to running such a project. And I ran it as a company. And that was something which really worked and what they appreciated. And what was important, for example, I said, I want to have minutes made during the meetings. Well, they never make minutes. So there came a lady, said, do you want it concise and brief or long? I said, long, of course, because you don't decide what you don't write or do right. I want you to write everything down. Well, those kind of small things are a completely different way of working and acting in such a process. And that was, I think, very interesting, and the city embraced it. And the way of working with such a committee has been copied for 4 or 5 times to other projects in the neighborhood. So it was stick, but maybe also finally a carrot.
Good. Any more questions for Robin from the audience? I see some comments in the chat. I see Laura saying, love the fact that you had a vision on leasing strategy and retail delivery and stuck to it no matter what. Was there anyone who tried to convince you to go the other way, Robin?
I'm always open. I'm always open to listen to alternatives, and if they are better, I embrace them, of course. But there were some things were carved in stone, and I'm not for sale. If I really don't want that, it just doesn't happen, unless someone convinces me that it was right. I think a few years ago, you could not have convinced me to have a Polestar showroom in my main. But given the retail developments these days, then you have to see what is happening in that landscape. And now I've chosen to do that. First, I was even in doubt, should I do it, yes or no? But then I learned that it brings about 25,000 very interesting consumers to the street. That's much more important for the street as a whole than whether I like a car showroom, yes or no.
Nice, Laura. If you're ready to unmute your microphone, I would love for you to step in the conversation as well, because I just heard from Giles that you have a fair amount of experience in managing shopping. So what?
It's interesting. It's just interesting because sometimes, you know, you get those conversations with, I get those conversations with my leasing manager where he'll have an offer from a brand or a tenant that I'm sort of like, oh, I'm not sure about that, and I try and stick to my guns, and sometimes the commerciality argument wins over what I believe the right thing to do in terms of the, you know, customer profile and the aspiration of the centre is. So I just wondered if it's the same situation, and how you've got round those conversations. And I suppose it's easier when you own the street. But yeah, it's just interesting in that, really.
But that's a very good point, you say, Laura, because we would have never achieved this result if there were not 8 private real estate owners who just understand that this was the best way to do that, and they couldn't do it. When I said I've done it for my own project, shall I do it for yours and make the impact much bigger? Then you talk to people of the same blood type. That's much easier with the same interests. That's always a problem with other shopping streets where you have 80, 90 owners, of which half is never even prepared to pick up the phone to do something. So for the main, it's of critical importance that the majority of the owners were in the lead.
Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. Any more questions for Robin?
I see some familiar faces.
Yeah, people you've welcomed in Rotterdam already.
Yes.
Nice. Well, then it tells how inspiring the stories are, that they want to hear it again and again and again. That's a good sign, I would say. Giles, what do you think? Will we open up the floor to the rest of the Southampton participants? Because I would love to hear first. Thank you, Robin, and then let's go to the poll. Let's do that first, because I think there's some key takeaways from Robin's story that we would love to have your reflections on. For vital main streets in Southampton, my key takeaway from the case study of the Main is the importance of active curatorship to create a balanced street, the role of a local champion like Robin or anyone else in sparking change, street management is a profession, what the importance of main street attractions is, how local family run businesses are better for the quality of the street, of course, all of the above, for those of you who like to seek the middle, or anything else we've missed. Please give us your votes. I see some people having to leave early. No worries about that. I hope you've enjoyed it. And we hope to see you in person in Rotterdam or Southampton at some point with the Eurostar connection that has been improved in recent years, of course. And let's see if we can close the poll. Yes, all of the above again. But if people have to decide, then it's the role of a local champion in sparking the change with second up. Okay, thank you so much. So any reflections from Southampton on these stories that we've heard? Because we would love to hear. In the beginning when we were planning this program, yeah, it's like, okay, we can share the stories of Rotterdam, but we are more than certain that we can also learn in Rotterdam from what is being developed in the city of Southampton. It might not seem like that because we're sending all these great messages from the city of Rotterdam, but we probably could do an equal exchange with you to present like-minded stories from your end of the sea. Let's see. But who would like to share some reflections on what you've learned, maybe key takeaways or things that we could take along when moving into the future? Anyone who would?
Charlotte, I just wonder if Alan Gordon might be willing to speak, because Alan has taken the learning from the Maint and tried to apply it in Southampton. Would that be okay if Alan just said a few words?
Absolutely.
Oh, well, yeah. I've attempted it, Robin, but of course I don't own the street, so there's a bit of a difference there. I think the key is the people who do own the street, between them, need to buy into it, and of course that needs quite a bit of persuading, because if they don't get it, if they don't see the vision for it, then all they think about is short-term cost rather than longer-term gain. So I think there's a challenge there for all of us to not only find somebody who can do what you've done, but ensure that people have got the right sense in their heads as to what this is about. There may be some other opportunities in the city as well as the particular stretch of street that I've been looking at. And personally, I think it probably needs a bit of a kickstart somehow, maybe a bit of seed corn funding to help persuade people to go down the right route.
What have your interventions looked like in the past, Alan?
My interventions have been very traditional in the construction and development front, as has been the case in the UK for many years. It's been more a case of demolishing and clearing a site and building something new. But what I learned from my visits to Rotterdam and from talking to Robin is that there are many opportunities to refurbish even buildings which are pretty boring and 1950s or 60s approach. I think there are possibilities. This is the example that I've been talking about, which we have been through the planning process as far as getting feedback from planners, and as you can see, it was thrown up in the late 50s, early 60s. I think on this occasion, there's very little to be gained by demolishing it and rebuilding it, because I don't think you gain a massive amount of value. So it is ideal for this kind of approach. It's not as nice looking as the building that you're talking about in Mint, Robin, but it is an example. And the street is owned by, I think 3 of the units are owned by the city council, and the remainder are owned now by a charitable trust. So getting the charitable trust to understand what we're talking about is not an easy thing.
Thanks for sharing that. Any more reflection we would like to hear, Giles? You know the network the best.
Just to say that that's opposite the hotel where you stayed, Robin, and were troubled by the pigeons. I remember that. Yeah, it's right opposite that.
But the charity trust who owns those other buildings, why would they like to be the long-term owner? What's their interest of being a long-term owner? Why not selling it to the city or to someone who does see possibilities and go on long-term?
That's a complex question to answer, Robin. I think the money is foreign, and it's a trust. It's complicated. Unfortunately, it wasn't that many years ago that the whole of that building was actually owned by the city council, and they sold 3/4 of it. Why they sold 3/4 and not all of it, I'm not sure, but they sold 3/4 of it. Getting to whenever you're dealing with a charitable trust, trying to get to the people who are decision makers is difficult. And when it's foreign money as well, that makes it even more distant. So it's quite a challenge to get that. Maybe you're right. Maybe the answer is for somebody to buy it off them and start again.
Together with you.
Yeah. So if you want an investment in Southampton, Robin, there's one there for you.
The deal being made. Go ahead, Robin.
Well, if it's more than 50 kilometers from Rotterdam,
yeah,
it takes me too much time to look at it.
Yeah, quite right. Quite right.
Any more reflections people would like to share? See if
I wonder if sorry, Chris has a question, Charlotte.
Chris, go ahead. Sorry, I was watching.
Thank you, Charlotte. Well, it was more of a reflection, really, because I think obviously there's a huge amount of ambition and programs of work which have made Rotterdam an even better city than it was before. So I sort of commend the work, and it's really given us a lot of things to think about. We're on a bit of a transformational journey ourselves. So we have got one of the biggest transformations in our transport system and our transport policy in decades. We have got one of the most ambitious environmental programs in the country, which we're calling our Green City Agenda. And we have got a City of Culture bid in the program to be recognised as the UK City of Culture in 2025. So we're knitting together all of the themes that we've heard today. I think there's a lot of alignment to what we're trying to do in Southampton. So it's been really interesting hearing your reflections from the different speakers. It's been a really good session. So thank you everybody for coming onto it. I would just reflect that we faced a lot of opposition actually to some of the changes around the transport, because in the city, the car has been king for over 60 years since we've rebuilt after the Second World War. And we've seen a lot of pushback in reclaiming some of that space. And we think it's the right thing to do because it is the future of livable cities. It addresses air pollution, good for business. And this is what businesses and companies are telling us. But what we hear from the public is that this is exactly opposite to all of those things that we're trying to design and encourage. So we're seeing a little bit of what we call in the UK a bit of a culture war between sort of the two camps. And I think we've got to do a better job of selling some of that. I think somebody said the wow pictures about what it could be, because I think we've got to do a better job of making that story very compelling for people. But I think there's a lot of similarities challenges. There's a lot of exciting things we're doing that I think we'd love to share from the city's perspective to what Rotterdam are.
Thanks so much, Chris, for unraveling this. And I think it sounds familiar with some pushback from communities at first instance when changing specifically parking and traffic arrangements within a city. And I'm very keen to learn in the future how you will be managing that, because my experience is with good conversations and good perspectives on the future, but also a thorough sort of co-creative process helps a lot in having people to understand what the new perspective would look like. So, but best of luck with navigating that. It sounds familiar.
Christopher, may I ask a question? Do you think there's room for temporary testing of the idea of giving more space to pedestrians? The idea that we like to call tactical urbanism, where you don't spend an awful lot of money, you just get some pylons out and you test it for a week and then see what happens and how people respond. If it turns out to be a terrible mistake, it's easy to reverse and you haven't spent an awful lot of public money. But if it turns out to be an appreciated idea, then you can build on it. So would you, or maybe you're doing this already, right? To use this kind of temporary activation.
It's a really good point, Hans. And actually, there's a little bit of a case study in Southampton about using these powers. So the government gave us the ability to move quite quickly during the pandemic to trial out new forms of sort of transport and road allocation. So we've done that across the city in different areas, and we've had very different reactions each time each one of these has been put in. One was a sort of more of a residential street, and the sort of the pushback was, well, where is our consultation? We expect a consultation before you put things in. And, you know, that's a legitimate view. But then in other areas, you know, we put it in, and then initially there was like, this is going to be a disaster. This will be terrible. But then the reality of living with it on a day-to-day basis meant that people got used to it and thought, oh, actually, it's not as bad as I can't tell if I've, you're all mute.
Sorry, was it my connection or were you obstructed for a while? Chris, maybe you should repeat the last bits.
Oh, sorry, it's the road has been dug up earlier this week to put some broadband cabling in, and it's it's not helped my internet connection. We've done it across the city in different areas, and in some areas we've put it in, it's run, and it's been successful, and people have gotten used to it. In other areas, there was a kind of a willingness to make sure that there was a consultation. But we've got one scheme that Go Southampton are sort of leading on, which is in Bedford Place, which is a sort of a small sort of independent business area of the city. And that's been a very interesting conversation. There's a lot of people that have attributed the road being closed to their businesses doing very badly, but also they've sort of neglected to sort of mention the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic and the whole economy is locked down. But it has been, that's the thing to sort of attack. Well, it's because the road is closed and that's why we haven't got people here. But I think, you know, we need to do a better job of kind of making that a more livable and livable space, because it just closing a road off probably isn't enough. You have to show people what that space could be. And unfortunately, in the British winter, it's really difficult to make a compelling. It would be interesting to see how people react to these new spaces that we've done. But I think if we would have had to done full consultations on all of the schemes at the start, then potentially you might not have seen some of these schemes going in. But the fact that we've been able to use temporary powers has sort of allowed a bit of creativity. And I think, you know, where it's worked well is when we've engaged and people have been part of that process, and we've brought people with us to kind of be in that conversation. But just dropping things in can get quite strong reactions.
Yeah.
Robin, how do you view this for the maint, the balance between cars, parking, and pedestrians? And I'm also curious how you view the investments that Emile was talking about, which also mean that a lot of the car traffic will be diminished from in the city center in the next 10 years.
As you know, Hans, they have already taken out about 2,000 to 3,000 parking places for private cars in the very city center. So that's quite a lot. There's a parking place on the main which will become a green area. That's going to happen, so we lose parking spaces over there. But we are fortunate to have quite some big parking garages in the vicinity of the main. I think the public has to get used to that. And the city of Rotterdam now has lowered the prices, so it is cheaper to park in a new parking garage than parking on the street. And parking on the street is actually hardly possible in a very city center. So that's that at the moment that the street is successful, it attracts more people, it attracts more cars, it attracts more bicycles. But look at the canals in Amsterdam. At a certain moment, it is what it is. So don't cycle with two next to each other because there's no room. So at a certain moment, the room which is there is going to be divided in the only way, which means that the traffic slows down. Of course, it's more dangerous, so the cyclist looks better around himself, maybe naturally used to do. And sometimes it comes to a grinding halt. Yes, that's the consequence. I don't know if it's a question, if this is an answer to your question.
No, so I guess you're saying that you would still need car parking in your street for it to be successful.
No, that's not what I say.
Okay, that's what I was curious about.
No, we took out already half of the parking places at the main,
right,
and added that to the pavement.
Right. For you, the pedestrians are more important than the people visiting by car.
But don't forget the people who live above the shops. All those people who live there, they can ask for a cheap parking license for their car because they live there. And a lot, the most, you call that, the people who are most against taking the parking place out of the streets are the people who live above
the residents,
the apartments above, who don't want to lose the possibility of parking their own car because they have a cheap license from the city to park their own car in the public area.
Yeah. So Chris, if it interests you, Hans shared before our Placemaking Europe website in the toolbox that's there. I'll just share it. I'll show you really quickly. But there's actually one tool that has been developed by Bende, and that's actually a tactical urbanist organization, and they did these tactical interventions to test out the pedestrianization of large parts of the inner city of Rotterdam. So this is not going into detail as much of this specific intervention, but more their general approach. But it might be interesting to check out their work because they've done these interventions in which they partly took out and replaced it, because I think indeed closing off a street is not the only thing you need to do. You also need to show the alternative and make people sense and feel what is ahead of them to see what a future could look like. So any last reflections?
Yeah, actually closing of the street is something what is happening at the mains. At certain parts of the mains are just fenced off during the weekends. So the horeca, the restaurants and the bars create kind of a secluded place where the cars cannot be. So that is already happening in the past at certain moments of the especially the weekend.
Yeah. I'm seeing Mark saying I would be interested in seeing statistics for business activity and footfall changes from greening or pedestrianization schemes in Rotterdam. Do we have any already? Do we know that? Of course, a question to Emile maybe for after this event, but.
No, I know that Emile has been measuring before with Wi-Fi systems. They're not allowed to do so anymore, but it did provide great data when they were still able to do that. And one of the squares, for instance, that was a vacant space, more or less, they turned into a green space temporarily, measuring the effect on the use of the square. The amount of users tripled and the staying time doubled. And that then led them to make a more permanent intervention to turn that square into a green space more permanently. And then again, they saw the numbers double. Yeah. So and this has actually been the Lange Kerkplein, the Grote Kerkplein, has been the case to make for the Schouwburgplein then. Because with these numbers behind them, the politicians could convince the council members to make the investment in the flying grass carpet coming to the Schouwburgplein, and now the much larger scale, more permanent investment to make that more, turn that more into a permanent intervention. So I think in the case of the city of Rotterdam, measuring has been extremely important for making these cases.
Thank you.
Well, we could see if we can ask Emil if these if this data is open access. So please do, if you would love to know that, reach out to us. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time, because we said that we were going to end in 1 minute, but we can also keep the room open for a little bit for some informal chats if people are interested. But I see some people are already leaving or have just left. I want to allow everybody to move into their evening if they like. So I'm formally going to close off with this. So I want to thank Go Southampton for co-organizing this event with us, but most particularly for all of you to virtually visit Rotterdam today. And thank the speakers, Hans, Robin, Olof, and Emil for their great presentations to virtually take you guys around in Rotterdam. And of course, we hope to see you physically here in the city as soon as the COVID restrictions allow us to meet in person again. And the other way around, we would love to see you in Southampton and see all your great improvements and cases coming to life. So thank you again for joining us today, and please stick around if you want to ask some more informal questions. Grab a beer. We'll have an opportunity for a more of a virtual bar here, and thank you for your attention for this lengthy but highly interesting conversation we've had with you. Have a good afternoon.
Karen has been waving for quite some time.
Go ahead. We'll just
okay. There's lots of interesting. It was really so what I see is a bit of a sort of a mentoring relationship going on between Southampton and Rotterdam, and I know Giles has been a great advocate for many years. And I guess my question is, who does Rotterdam look to for inspiration and ideas and creativity? Is that sort of internally born? Is it looking to other places, other cities, and other methodologies?
Good question, Rotterdam.
Yes.
I think it's Hans and Robin who are here to answer it.
Oh, it's a very good question. Actually, Emil should really answer that, of course. So I don't know, Robin, what do you think? What's the kind of city that Rotterdam looks at?
To be honest, I don't know. I'm a bit a belly button staring kind of guy of the main. So of course, I read those things. For example, Barcelona, when we were talking about the grid of the streets and the plan Barcelona now has executed to just cut out in the middle of the grid streets and make squares. That's nice to see. But to be honest, me as an individual, of course, I see what happens, but all those 7 plans or those 7 projects, I see them now. I read them in the newspaper, but I'm not privately heavily involved in those. Yeah. So is Rotterdam looking at other cities? Beyond any doubt. But I'm not. I can't just say or give you some concrete examples.
I know on one of the networks that Emil for sure is one of the people who brings in new knowledge into the city, and then knows how to tell the story, knows how to convince the alderman, etc., etc. And Emil's very connected and always looking for examples. He's, among others, a very active member of Placemaking Europe. So he's been visiting the conferences, and I know he takes a lot of ideas from there, and also the feeling that you're not just a you're not alone. You're not this crazy mad person, because there's 4,000 other persons in Europe who are doing similar projects. So I know that's been very important for Emil, for sure. But we really should ask him himself. It's for Rotterdam, it's definitely not Amsterdam, right? So. No. So that's we kind of have a Rotterdam-Amsterdam situation going on always. Although I guess the cities in the Netherlands, they do learn from each other as well.
You do see a little bit of super blocks, indeed, the Barcelona scheme of pedestrianizing streets and taking on these bold moves. I do think especially the Hofboog learns a lot from the High Line project in New York. But other than that, yeah, inspiration comes from everywhere. Rotterdam has been very successful in attracting some of the global conferences as well. So they had Walk 21, Global Futures Summit recently. So they've connected also to cities around the world for inspiration, obviously, and putting themselves on the map of the international discourse, which always helps to make some bold moves after, to keep the promises of the words you spoke on the conferences, I guess.
Thank you. I guess just a follow-up for me was also Southampton, I think sometimes is quite a frustrated city, and there's been lots of opportunities, and some talk about missed opportunities. And the bit for me is what really made it happen, what's making it happen. In Rotterdam, what's the difference? Because lots of people have ambitions and ideas, but it's the thing that gets it done, as your strapline, is really key. And I think that's what we're seeking to do. And we know we've got opportunities. City of Culture is definitely a galvanising framework for us at the moment, and there's lots of opportunities. But what was it in Southampton? Sorry, in Rotterdam.
I do think, by the way, that the City of Culture in 2001 was a big turning moment for the city, because until then they always felt that they were lagging behind, reconstructing the city center still very much, and that was the kind of the first moment, I think, that Rotterdam felt, oh, we can be this proud city on our own account, if you know what I mean. And we're not just only about the bomb raid and the reconstruction, but we're also about culture. So that was a kind of a new discovery, I think, for them. So in that sense, I think an event like this can be very, very important to a city. I think also Rotterdam is always very motivated by the fact that they do want to. They do want to keep building their own economy. They don't want to lose out to other cities. So what we have felt, for instance, working on Soho and working with the housing corporations, there's a large infrastructure of housing corporations, right, in social housing in the Netherlands. They owned a lot of buildings that they were leaving empty in the city, and we managed to get them opened up and used by the local entrepreneurs, startups, social enterprises, the cultural creatives, kind of the people who normally don't find a space in the city. And one of the reasons why we could convince those housing corporations and the city to open up their buildings for these is that if you don't, then they will leave to other cities. They will leave to Amsterdam, and it was actually happening back at the time. So that was a big motivator for Rotterdam to kind of step up the game and really start doing stuff and not just talk about it. So this sense of there is a sense of urgency to keep developing the city in this way, I think. I don't know if that's an answer to your question at all, but
no, thank you. I do think confidence, ambition, desire, and just everyone pulling together, really. I think that's the really key. And I think Belle's right. There's a feeling of that happening right now, actually.
And I think also the city has been very very strategic about keeping the programs, investment programs on public space going for the past, I would say 20 years now. So the 7 projects that Emil just presented, they didn't just come and fall out of the air last year. They built upon those experiences of 20 years of investing into it started with the city lounge program and recovering the inner city and then reconnecting that to other parts of the city, and the Rotterdam at eye level strategy. And the city has been really concisely been working on this, and each time been looking for, okay, we've now got this experience, and how can we now make it bigger? How can we build on that? So yeah, so they didn't start with those 7 projects. That's just what I'm trying to say.
Plus, the political climate became more and more open for entrepreneurs who came to the city of Rotterdam and brought their plans, and that makes a lot of difference. At the moment, you have a good connection with an alderman, or you have a reputation because you have done things the city really likes. That really works, because if not to brag, but at the moment I like a plan and I call an alderman on our mobile and say, well, I have a plan, I want to talk to you, I can keep on talking or having an appointment within 2 days. At the moment you have someone else has the same plan, doesn't have the connection or the reputation, well, then it's difficult. So it's very important that you that you use your air miles, which have been building over the last years, to get things done. That is easier to convince people who maybe don't see it at the first glance, but because someone who has a reputation, then they think, well, maybe I don't see it, but maybe it's there, but I don't see it. Instead of saying, no, sorry, I don't see it, so sorry, thank you. So that it gives you a head start with those people in important places, to give you the benefit of the doubt. I think that's the right description. At the moment you come with something, and you have a good reputation, you get a benefit of the doubt. That's more the city of Rotterdam over the last years. They didn't want to organize everything by themselves, keep everything to their chest. They gave the outside world more the opportunity to present themselves with plans and then embrace it and work with it. Is that the same experience you have, Hans?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we have also experienced that the city of Rotterdam is very open to allow experimentation to happen and to be bold there, because for instance, I work in Soho with the train in the back of my picture. This crazy chef comes with a crazy idea, and the first thing that the Jacco working for the municipality of Rotterdam says is that yeah, of course we're going to do this. He doesn't begin to talk about all the objections that he must have gone through his head as well. And a lot of the placemaking that we did in Soho was enabled by his famous Article 5. He always said, at the end of the day, we need to fix these things within the system, but I'm not always going to do that up front, because if I'm first want to arrange everything, and by then time we have it arranged, all the energy is drained from the initiative. So you guys just go and do it. I will have certain game rules, but then for the rest of it, I will do Article 5, which means I don't see it. And while you're organizing this, in the meantime, I will organize it within the municipal system. So working together with people like Jacco, in this case, Jacco Bakker, on behalf of the municipality, the city of Rotterdam, has made us fly, really, because that's the difference between getting things done or not.
Yeah, beautiful. Claire, welcome. Just please jump in. We're in a very informal conversation, so it's not highly moderated with hands anymore. So please just jump in if you have a question or something to say.
Well, I've been here a lot, and I must apologise. I had my vaccine, and so I've been
congratulations.
Off camera listening, but I was just going to echo, my experience of Rotterdam was first through when North Sea Jazz Festival moved to Rotterdam, and so I've worked very closely with that team for nearly 20 years. And I remember when it went to Rotterdam, people were just amazed that it moved from its original location. And when I was talking to the North Sea team, they said that Rotterdam just made everything possible. And every time there was a barrier that they came up, the team in Rotterdam made it possible until it wasn't a question of why should they move to Rotterdam, it was why shouldn't they move to Rotterdam. Yeah. And I think that sense of boldness and ambition is what's really coming through from this afternoon's presentation. And I think we are really getting there in Southampton. I think we have all the ingredients, but we're just in the process of making our cake, whereas you've made the cake and you've got the icing on it, and now you're doing the bake-off show to show off your skills. You know, but we are there in terms of, I think, some of the collaboration. Some of the people that are on this call are really putting a lot of time and effort and thought into trying to be a really collaborative, ambitious, joined-up city. But it's so inspiring to see all the work that you've done with, you know, with regards to our City of Culture bid. But I think what you've been able to do is just go that little bit further. You know, when you talk about having, you know, bought a street, we have the ambitions for some of those things, but we haven't quite pulled that together. So I found this really inspiring, and I hope we can, I know Giles will want us to continue our discussions, but I think it's really helpful to us. One, to be able to ask you questions about how you've managed to do all the things you've done, but also just the sheer sense of what the possibilities are when you manage to be so collaborative and cohesive. So I found it very inspiring this afternoon, and I can see other colleagues nodding their heads. So thank you so much.
Well, there's a formula which is very important. It's contagious enthusiasm, really contagious enthusiasm. Be an expert in the field where you're talking about, and do what you have promised. Those three things, that combination is unbeatable.
Beautiful.
I definitely think, you're spot on there. I really do, because I think we've begun to believe as a city that we could win City of Culture. And the more that we believe that, the more we're working together and the more we're being strategic about what we're doing. So we're not quite on you know, I think we're 1.5 into your three sort of different prongs. But I think you're absolutely spot on. And it is believing that you can do it, having the ideas, having the vision, and then making it happen. I think you're absolutely right.
Nice, and congratulations on getting your vaccine, Claire. I think on this end of the pond, we're very jealous of that. It might take us the.
I hadn't quite factored in the effect it might have on my work life, but I am very pleased.
yeah. We'll have to wait until summer here for most of the age groups. So there's certain things that on that side of the pond you're much better at the moment. Nice. I think it's interesting, like someone else from the UK that really sparks this line of thinking of a yes and culture. You might be familiar with him, but it's Charles Landry, who is now leading the Creative Bureaucracy Festival, and that's very much about the discussion that we're having here about just having a clear vision and no restraining thoughts about what can't be done because of bureaucratic systems standing in the way, but really going for it and then finding your allies to get to that point. So I think there's some inspiration there from many of the sessions he's been leading and modules that he's been developing there.
Olof is not there anymore, but we have to realize that because of the Brexit, it's extremely difficult to bring art from the UK to the Netherlands, or musicians who go from A to B. The paperwork you need, the cost of the paperwork make it hardly possible for, call it, poor quality musicians or artists to do that, because there's so much red tape and regulations now involved. I had some experience with that. They could just they took £300 for a permit and all those kind of things. Well, those artists can't afford it. So that will it's terrible, but unfortunately true. The exchange of art between the countries, etc., with the Brexit is it's terrible.
Yeah, to end on a happy note, Robin.
No, but yeah, okay. I was just
okay.
thinking of the interesting idea of exchanging art and those kind of culture, but that has it's it's very difficult at this moment.
I'm still hopeful we might be able to do some of that though in our City of Culture bid, because in Southampton we have the oldest jazz club in the UK. So I have a sneaking suspicion that we might be able to do some exchanges with our North Sea friends and have a rationale to do that. So we won't let Brexit stop us collaborating.
That's the right spirit.
That'd be brilliant. Actually, we could think of a placemaking week Europe coming to Southampton, no? And use that kind of event to get more of that thinking on board and have not only artists in residence but also placemakers in residence. I think that would be great.
That's a brilliant idea. Now we mustn't tell anyone this idea because obviously we're in a competition. And I've revealed I've revealed one of our little thoughts. So yeah, we must keep it to that's a really good idea. And I think policymakers in the UK would be very interested in, because at the moment a lot of the placemaking around arts and culture happens in either London or in Manchester. You know, they're the two centres where those have come together really well. But to have a different voice in that, I think that's a really brilliant idea actually.
I'd be happy. I'm taking your role mostly as moderator here today, but I'd be happy to exchange with you on that after the event, Claire, as I'm acting as director of Placemaking Europe, and Hans is a board member, Giles is one of our leaders. So very happy to exchange on that if it's of interest.
Yes, that would be great. Well, if you go through Giles, we're working so closely with Go, so that would be brilliant.
Claire, I've had this conversation with Tim. What we think we might be able to do is put it in our manifesto for our second term as a project. You know, then effectively our members will get to vote on it, which gives it some resilience. So yeah, we think it would be a great idea too.
Well, I'm very keen on that.
It's a great moment also to test some of these big transitions happening with the network of placemakers.
Yeah. So I really like how we shifted this conversation to the kitchen table, more or less, of this, because you know, at any party you always find the best people in the kitchen. No, you have the best talks there. I see Ross raising her hand.
Yes, thank you. A good intro from the kitchen table. I'm a long-term Southampton resident and I convene a community forum. I apologise for being so late to the meeting. I was taking an elderly neighbour to have her vaccination and the queue was enormous. I'm sorry I was so late. And you may have already covered this. I'm really fascinated about how you engage the residents in this contagious enthusiasm. And certainly where I live, there are loads of people who love the city and want to see it do better. I agree with Carolyn. There's a whole thing about confidence and it's been here for a long time. And it's really encouraging to hear those of you working on this feeling that there's an upward feeling. In your work in Rotterdam, how did you involve people who live in the areas that have been regenerated or in areas that are being developed? Because I think taking people with you, and they can also be great help to you in bringing people along. So I just wondered if there was anything specific about the long-standing community who live in these spaces.
Well, I can personally, I can only speak from the experience of Zoho, I think, where we really managed to include a whole community. For us, it was first of all very important to be there, to really become part of the area. We actually moved our office into the area. Because if you want to build up a community, community building needs a lot of parties, we always think, and not just only the kind of the boring official participation stuff, but you need the informal side of things as well. So as much as we could, we celebrated. We held celebrations, festivals, and etc. And then, you know, when that happens on a Friday night, you just need to be there and be part of it and talk to people. So we couldn't have done that if we wouldn't have been a part of it in this case, I think. Really opening up to this idea of slow urbanism helped as well. not to just want to make a blueprint plan beforehand, which then would be top-down executed, and then the participation often turns into something like, this is our plan, what do you think of it, right? And you kind of push people into a more reactive response rather than them co-creating the plan together from the very beginning. So this whole idea of slow urbanism always also opened up for a whole set of voices to be there right at the start of the process, and to remain a part of the process. So it's a different type participation. It's not the participation of responding to a plan that is already there, but really creating the plans together, and then implementing ideas quickly was a very important part of that as well, because people love to participate, but they do want to see results quickly, because if you keep talking for 3 years, then the energy will have gone. These processes are often very much about trust. And trust you don't gain by talking, you gain it by doing stuff together. And these can just be small things, but once you achieve those small things, then people's minds will open up more, and then you will be able to achieve more larger things together.
Thank you. I mean, I think you're absolutely right about co-creation. I think people are more invested in things if they can see, even if it's only a tiny bit, the bit that they help to contribute to. So that's really helpful. But I guess that the City of Culture is helping us do that, because we have been involved in various online discussions. And I guess it doesn't help that we can't actually meet face to face. We can't have our Friday night in the park or whatever, because we're all stuck behind screens. So maybe that will get easier.
However, nowadays in our work, we do a lot of one-on-one walks in the neighborhood. So it is still possible to meet with people. Of course, you just need to be creative in the methods that you use. We have a caravan that we put in places to sleep there, and then people will come to you. There's a whole different way of participating, because then you'll get a conversation with the young kids hanging around, and the homeless people using the space as well. So I think we just need to be creative in that sense. And I think also for Zoe, it was very important for us to really make a deliberate decision that this wouldn't turn into a hipster paradise.